In today's episode, we're out here taking a look at the all-new 2017 Ford Raptor. This is really the off-road pickup truck in the half-ton segment. Other half-ton pickup trucks offer off-road packages, of course, but none go to the same lengths that we see Ford go to when turning the F-150 into the Raptor. When creating the Raptor, Ford did an awful lot more than just swap in some new tires and some new shocks. They did major structural and body modifications to the F-150 in order to make this the most capable off-road pickup truck in America. It's of course important to keep in mind that the Raptor is an off-road pickup truck, not a compact off-road vehicle like a Jeep Wrangler. So this is not going to go the same kind of places the Wrangler could go because of the overall size of the vehicle. As you've probably heard, the Raptor was designed for the Baja 1000 endurance race, and that's why we find the unique body modifications that we see up front and in the back. This is notably wider than the regular F-150, and that was all to accommodate a very unique front suspension design that gives us 13 inches of suspension travel up front, over 13 inches in the back. Ford has also given us a unique terrain management system with 6 unique drive modes, a 10-speed automatic transmission, a brand new all-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive hybrid system, and a new 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6 with over 500 pound-feet of torque. However, the Raptor is still a pickup truck, and it is important to keep that in mind in this review, because this is not going to be as nimble off-road as something like a Jeep Wrangler because of its overall size. This is almost the same length as a Chevy Suburban, so this is a very, very long, very wide vehicle. And as a result, we were not able to take this on much of our off-road test track. The off-road course that we typically test vehicles on here at Alex & Autos has very tight curves and it's very narrow. So this vehicle was just a little bit too wide, and with a 48-foot turning radius, it just was not able to make those tight corners. So if you want to know how well the Raptor does out on sand dunes or out in Moab, there are other channels that you can watch, but in this video, we're primarily going to be talking about how this differs from the regular F-150, how it compares to other options out there, and how well this works for your daily commute. As you approach the Raptor, one of the first things you'll notice is this very large Ford logo across the front grille, but the second thing you'll notice is how wide the Raptor is. Ford has added over 6 inches of width between the F-150 to the Raptor, and all that happens outboard of the LED headlamp modules. That causes the front end to have this very chiseled look right here around the headlamp modules themselves, and the chiseled area follows this LED light pipe that's inside the headlamp module itself. The increase in width was not about styling, it was all about off-road ability and the suspension design, because the Raptor has a unique front suspension versus the F-150 that makes this much more capable for off-road situations. From this angle, you can better see the light pipe going on inside the headlamp module, and you can see the chiseling going on because of the width increase for the Raptor. This is essentially the same size headlamp module that you find in the regular F-150, so all of this that you see here in this truck is unique to the Raptor. The regular F-150 would end right about there. Overall length for the Raptor ranges between 220 inches and 231 inches, depending on the cab that you get. At this point in time, all Raptor models are 4-door, 5-passenger trucks, but you do have the choice between the 2 different cab lengths. The bed is always going to be a 5.5-foot bed. In this video, we're driving the Raptor with the slightly smaller cab, so the rear doors are the suicide-style doors that have to open after the front doors. The front quarter panels feature functional vents for increased engine cooling, and you'll notice that the cab does not get wider. So the front of the vehicle right here across the engine bay gets wider to accommodate the front suspension and the tires. Then we drop down to the regular F-150's width, and then things bulge out a little bit again to accommodate the rear tires in the vehicle. In terms of overall length, the model that we're driving right here, which again is the shorter version of the Raptor, is a full 19 inches longer than a 3-row Dodge Durango. This is only 4 inches shorter than a Chevy Suburban. For an off-road vehicle, that means that the Raptor is very long and very wide. This is a full 56 inches longer than a Jeep Wrangler, and if you were to buy the long Raptor, that would be 67 inches longer than a Jeep Wrangler. And that is exactly why we were unable to take this vehicle on our usual off-road course. Out back, we find essentially the same tail lamp modules we find in the rest of the F-150 lineup, and then we have 2 cameras right here integrated into the handle for the tailgate. Below the tailgate, we find a 7-pin and a 4-pin wiring harness connector, tow hooks well integrated into the rear bumper, trail hitch receiver, parking sensors, and dual exhaust tips. With the latest generation of F-150s, Ford has dedicated themselves to saving weight and reducing engine displacement, and that has also affected the Raptor. This is 500 pounds lighter than the previous generation Raptor, and instead of a 6.2-liter V8, we find a 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6 under the hood. But this is not the same 3.5-liter twin-turbo engine that we find in the regular F-150. That 3.5-liter engine produces 375 horsepower and 470 pound-feet of torque, a very healthy number to be sure, but this engine cranks that dial on up to 11. This produces 450 horsepower and a whopping 510 pound-feet of torque. That is more torque than you find in certain 5-liter diesel V8 engines. It's also an important 76 pound-feet of torque more than the outgoing 6.2-liter V8, and it produces that at a lower RPM. In addition to producing more power and more torque than the 6.2-liter V8 engine, we also find 4 more gears in this transmission because this is the first Ford use of the new 10-speed automatic that was co-designed with General Motors. Interestingly enough, this is basically the same transmission that we should see under the hood of the Ford Mustang and the Chevy Camaro soon. Thanks to the light curb weight and the new engine and transmission, the EPA fuel economy rating goes from 12 miles per gallon in the city, 16 on the highway, to 15 in the city and 18 on the highway with this particular engine. Although you should keep in mind that this engine uses a start-stop system which can be a little bit annoying in the city, and real-world fuel economy is only going to be marginally higher than the old 6.2-liter V8 because you're probably going to be putting your foot down an awful lot harder with this engine because of how much fun it is. Coupled to the 10-speed automatic is an all-new all-wheel drive system. You might be thinking to yourself, all-wheel drive in a pickup truck is sacrilege, but it's important to remember that all-wheel drive versus four-wheel drive really is a distinction in search of meaning. The distinction is in truth mainly found in marketing because manufacturers may sell exactly the same system as an all-wheel drive system in one vehicle and a four-wheel drive system in another vehicle. Regardless of what you want to call the system in the Ford Raptor, it is one of the most capable that we find in any pickup truck in the US. The average pickup truck in America uses a transfer case, not a true center differential, to move power from the transmission's output to the front axle. The key thing to remember there is that when that system is engaged, the input for the front axle and the input for the rear axle are spinning at exactly the same rate. They're tied together. When systems like that are engaged, you can feel a binding feel in tight corners where the vehicle seems reluctant to turn as sharply as you want it to turn, and they're also not designed for use on pavement. The reason is quite logical, because if you're turning the vehicle very sharply, the front and the rear axles and all 4 wheels will need to be spinning at different speeds. And that's not going to be possible if the input for the front differential and the rear differential are tied together. Now, if you're on a loose surface like this grassy area right here, or a gravel road, or snow, or mud, or ice, one wheel can just spin in place, and that will help take up the slack in the system and allow those wheels to all spin at different ratios. But if you're on pavement, that's less possible and you might damage the system. The advantage to that traditional pickup truck four-wheel drive mode is that the systems are very durable, and that's why we see that mode in the Ford Raptor. But the Raptor also gets a unique mode, 4Auto. Now, this is not the same 4Auto mode that you see in a number of other pickup trucks out there, where they simply engage that transfer case by computer, because when the transfer case is engaged by the computer, you still get binding and you still have the front differential and the rear differential's inputs locked together. Instead of doing that, the Raptor has a unique alternative. This actually has a multi-plate clutch arrangement inside the transfer case that can send power to the front axle when it wants to, but when it's doing that, it allows the front axle to spin at a different rate than the rear axle, and it can also vary the amount of power to the front axle. So it can send 100% of the power to the rear, or up to 50% to the front with no wheel slip. Of course, if the rear tires were slipping, that mode could send 100% of the power to the front as well. Thanks to this unique design, you can actually leave the four-wheel drive system in the Raptor in that 4Auto mode at all times, and you don't have any binding problems, you don't have any parking problems, and you don't have to worry about damaging the system if you're driving it on pavement. In addition to the unique all-wheel drive system, we also have 6 driver selectable modes. Normal is, of course, for typical driving situations. We have average throttle response. You can select between 3 different steering feels, and the system will remember whether you engaged 2-wheel drive mode for optimum fuel economy or 4Auto for better traction. Normal mode also employs fairly aggressive auto start-stop to help improve city fuel economy. We then have the Sport mode, which tightens up the steering and then adjusts the transmission and the engine tuning for optimum sporty feel. We then have the Weather mode, which automatically engages the all-wheel drive system into the 4Auto mode, gives us a little bit of extra traction control, and mutes the throttle. Then we have the Baja mode, which is quite unique to the Raptor. That engages 4High automatically, again, not to be used on pavement, more on slippery surfaces right like here. The system then relaxes the traction and stability control, which is something that you need, especially if you're going to drive out on sandy surfaces, and then it tweaks the steering effort a little bit. The last mode is Rock Crawl, which is used for lower speed off-road situations. That automatically engages the low ratio mode in the transfer case, automatically engages hill descent control, and it gives the steering extra boost. The F-150 in general offers some of the highest payload and towing capacities in the half-ton pickup truck segment, but as you might expect, opting for the Raptor package reduces payload and towing notably. Instead of a 12,200 pound tow rating that you find in certain F-150 models, the Raptor ranges between 6,000 and 8,000 pounds depending on the options that you select. Payload will range from 1,000 to 1,200 pounds instead of 3,270 in the max payload model of the F-150. Keep in mind that when we're talking about payload in a pickup truck, we're not just talking about things that we have in the bed, like bags of potting soil or whatever it is that you've put back here. We're also talking about passengers and luggage in the cabin. The first thing you'll notice when you start taking the Raptor off the beaten path is how large of a vehicle this is. Again, this is notably larger and wider than something like a Grand Cherokee, and the turning circle is quite wide as well. It's around 48 feet for the model that we're driving here. And that means if you're going to try and take this on a very tight off-road course, expect to do an awful lot of 3, 4, and 5-point turns. It also means that these very basic trails on the off-road course that I typically use to test vehicles on are the only ones that the Raptor would fit on. I'm sure I could have taken this on some of the gnarlier courses, but I'm also sure that Ford would like me to return their truck with some of the paint left on it. When driving the Raptor off-road, you'll really notice the new 10-speed automatic transmission and the new all-wheel drive system. Because we don't get the same kind of binding that we get in a traditional pickup truck four-wheel drive system when you're really cranking the steering hard, that makes us feel a little bit more sure-footed, especially when you're in odd camber situations. The 10-speed automatic transmission ensures that this vehicle always has the right gear ratio for the situation. As I said earlier, the Ford 10-speed automatic transmission was not designed to try and increase the ratio spread between first gear and the final gear. It was designed to give us more variation between the two. That's an important distinction because instead of trying to give us very good fuel economy at 80 or 90 miles an hour, this transmission is trying to give us more gears to choose from around 20 to 30 or 40 miles an hour. In normal driving situations, this transmission will skip gears. So if you're driving this gently out on the road, it'll actually skip second frequently or sometimes skip third gear and use second and fourth instead. If you're off-roading, however, those extra gears are really noticeable, especially if you're in the low ratio mode. Because if you've been off-roading in a vehicle with an automatic transmission and a low ratio mode, you know that sometimes those shifts are pretty big jumps when you're in that low ratio mode. This smooths that out because we have more variation to choose from down there. It also helps improve towing feel because we have more gears to choose from in those towing situations. It helps things be a little bit smoother. Gear changes in this 10-speed automatic transmission are nothing like the ZF 9-speed automatic transmission. Very much like ZF's 8-speed automatic that we find in a lot of rear-wheel drive vehicles, or Mercedes-Benz 9-speed automatic that we find in luxury cars. Acceleration in the Raptor is nothing short of blistering for a pickup truck. We ran from 0 to 60 in 5.2 seconds, which is very, very impressive. That is notably faster than the last generation Raptor, which we clocked at 6.9 seconds. It also is notably faster than the regular F-150 with the twin-turbo 3.5-liter V6 at 6.4 seconds. This engine again produces more power and more torque than the regular version of the 3.5-liter twin-turbo engine, but it also has that 10-speed automatic, not the 6-speed. The extra gears allow this engine to stay really close to its optimum power band while accelerating, and the 6-speed tends to get a little bit out of it on either side. In our braking test, we ran from 60 miles an hour back to 0 in 146 feet, which is quite long for a half-ton pickup truck. The tires are the reason for that. Although these are very wide tires, they're also very off-road oriented tires, and that does result in reduced traction in on-road situations. That's going to affect your braking and it's going to affect your handling. On the downside, many off-road tires are quite noisy, and the ones that Ford chose for this particular application are actually very quiet. Thanks primarily to the tires, but also due to the ride height increase that we find in the Raptor, I'm going to give handling a C. This definitely falls behind the other versions of the F-150 when it comes to overall on-road manners. The regular versions of the F-150, especially the top-end trims, are some of the best handling pickup trucks in America. And that's thanks to the lightweight construction as well as Ford's dedication to a very good suspension design, especially up front. The Raptor, however, has a very different mission in mind. This is the off-road Baja-focused vehicle. And as a result, we have a very different front suspension design, we have a different frame in this vehicle, different body parts in this vehicle. The ride height is taller and the overall suspension feel is very different. The turning circle in this vehicle is approximately 48 feet in diameter, which is very, very wide. That is considerably wider than something like a Grand Cherokee or a Jeep Wrangler or other off-road vehicles that you might be looking at. Now, that's not really a problem if you're blasting this across a sand dune at 60 or 70 miles an hour, but it is a little bit of a problem if you want to try and take this rock crawling or on tighter off-road courses. Thanks to the overall suspension design of this vehicle, this easily gets an A+ when it comes to the ride. This has one of the best pickup truck rides that you can buy. Obviously, payload suffers a little bit because of the off-road mission of this vehicle and the desire to have all that suspension travel, but the payoff is a supple ride whether you're off-roading or on-roading. The way the dampers in the Raptor are tuned, things are a little bit firmer at the start of the suspension's travel, so we get a little bit more road feel out on roads right like this, and then things get softer in the middle of the travel, and then they get firmer at the bottom end of the travel. That's to help soak up bumps in the middle and then help keep things from bottoming out when you reach the end of that 13 inches of suspension travel. I was expecting the Raptor to be noisier out on the road because of the off-road focused tires. However, we scored exactly the same 68.5 decibel cabin noise score as we did in the last F-150 we drove. When it comes to fuel economy, the Raptor definitely falls behind other versions of the F-150 because of the wide tires, the wide body, and the other modifications they have made for off-road duty. Even though we do have that new 10-speed automatic transmission, fuel economy wasn't exactly tops on the priority list for the new 10-speed transmission design. And as a result, we have been averaging about 14.5 miles per gallon over a week of very mixed driving. So I'm going to have to give this a D when it comes to fuel economy. You will definitely get better fuel economy in the regular versions of the F-150 with the lower output 3.5 liter V6. Although the EPA fuel economy ratings for this 3.5 liter V6 are notably above the 6.2 liter V8 that we found in the last generation of the Raptor, this engine's average fuel economy in real-world driving is not that far off of the old 6.2. Keep in mind that it's going to take a certain amount of gasoline to produce 400 horsepower, regardless of whether your engine is turbocharged or not turbocharged, so you're going to be using a lot of fuel if you like to drive your vehicle hard. You should also know that direct injection turbocharged engines like the one under this hood tend to dump extra fuel into the cylinder at higher loads in order to help improve cylinder cooling. They actually use that extra gasoline to help cool the cylinder itself down and keep the engine from overheating. And that does, of course, reduce your fuel economy because you're using gasoline for cooling the engine, not just to propel you forward. The Raptor is without a doubt one of the most fun half-ton pickup trucks you can buy, and I have to admit that if I were half-ton truck shopping, I would definitely put the Raptor on my shopping list. I'm not quite sure whether I would go the practical route and get a regular F-150 with the slightly lower tune of the 3.5 liter twin-turbo engine, or whether I'd go all the way and get the Raptor, but I do know that I would probably replace these tires aftermarket. It's unlikely that I would ever take my Raptor on the Baja 1000, so I would probably replace these tires with some slightly more on-road focused tires, and I realize that sounds like sacrilege, but I think that this vehicle gives up just a little bit too much when it comes to braking and handling for that off-road performance, and I don't need that much off-road performance. I would also say that I hope that this all-wheel drive system makes its way into other F-150 pickup trucks because I really love the way this operates in its 4 auto mode. Again, this is quite different than the 4 auto mode that we find in most pickup trucks out there. When this is in 4 auto mode, it behaves more like an all-wheel drive crossover or some of those luxury vehicles out there that use a Torsen true center differential like the Saab 9-7 Aero that I own. When it comes to pricing and comparisons, the most important thing to remember about the Raptor is that it really does stand alone in the half-ton pickup truck segment at the moment. We do have entries like the Tundra TRD Pro or the Ram Rebel, or off-road packages offered in the Silverado pickup trucks. However, they don't go to the same level of changes that we see in the Raptor. Not only does the Raptor get more power, it also has an entirely different frame than the other F-150 trucks and a unique front suspension design. For 2017, the Raptor will start at $49,265, and you can see that we do have a fairly long list of standard feature content in that model. That may seem pretty expensive compared to a regular F-150, but when you actually start crunching the numbers and you try and configure an FX4 about the same as the Ford Raptor, it'll actually only be about a $5,000 premium over the X4. And again, we get that higher output engine, the more advanced four-wheel drive system, the off-road targeted software, the different body, different frame, the unique suspension, gnarlier tires, and that all-new 10-speed automatic. Now for 2018, the 10-speed automatic will be standard in the FX4, but for 2017 it's not. If you want the larger cab, you can get that for around $3,000, and the Torsen front differential is an extra $500. I'm actually a little surprised that Ford didn't make the Torsen front differential standard in the Raptor, because I think that's an option that I would select, especially if I actually planned on taking my truck off-road. If I were Raptor shopping today, I would take the Super Crew version of the truck, the Torsen front differential, radar adaptive cruise control, and the panoramic moonroof. That and all the accompanying packages that are required to be added for those features would set me back about $65,000. And if you fully load your Raptor, you'll end up right around $72,000. Acceleration and off-road ability are obviously top likes for the Raptor. This is an incredibly fast truck with its all-new 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6 engine and the 10-speed automatic transmission, and it's an awful lot of fun to drive out on the road. On the downside, handling definitely suffers for on-road use because, again, we have those off-road focused tires. If you wanted better handling on-road, you would have to swap those factory tires out for something that's a little bit grippier on pavement. The wide turning radius for the Raptor is also a little bit of a problem, as I said earlier. We just weren't able to fit it on our usual off-road test course because of that wide turning radius. It also makes the Raptor a little bit trickier to park in suburban-style parking situations. I was surprised about that because a 6-inch increase in a pickup truck doesn't really seem like that much until you try and put it in small mall parking spots, and there the Raptor did have trouble fitting. On the flip side, I really like the way the Raptor is styled. I think Ford did an excellent job of widening the body and making it work with the narrower headlamps and narrower grille that we see in the standard F-150. As I said earlier, Ford did not make the grille wider, they didn't relocate the headlamps, all they really did was change the front quarter panels and rear quarter panels to accommodate the bigger tires and the different suspension up front. But that actually gives the Raptor that very attractive look that we saw earlier. I also think the Raptor is actually a fairly good deal, only $5,000 extra versus a comparably equipped FX4 for a vehicle that has so many unique parts in it really is not a bad deal. And at the moment, one of the big selling points of the Raptor is that it really has no competition in America, and therefore we're not going to have any comparison section in this video, because it really isn't possible to. If you want the most capable off-road pickup truck, especially if you want something that's very Baja focused, the Raptor really is your only option. You could, I suppose, take any pickup truck, take it to a custom shop, and have them put a new frame under there for you, put a unique suspension, body modifications, etc. But that's not really something we can compare to the Raptor because it wouldn't have a factory warranty, and Ford will actually warrant the Raptor even if you plan on taking it on that Baja course. Now for 2018, we might have a competitor with the rumored Ram Rebel TRX. It's not official yet, but Chrysler has been dropping some pretty broad hints about it. It should be a Ram 1500 with the 6.2-liter supercharged V8 engine out of their Hellcat models, detuned to around 575 horsepower. It appears that Ram will be doing something very similar in terms of the body design for the Rebel TRX because it's being shown off with fender flares up front and in the back to accommodate larger, wider off-road tires and probably a tweaked front suspension design. What we don't know is how tweaked the overall vehicle will be versus a regular Ram 1500. If Ram chooses not to upgrade the frame, for instance, then there would still be a big reason to buy the Ford Raptor over the Ram 1500, because that frame difference and the frame change between the regular F-150 and the Raptor really is one of the big reasons that the Raptor is so capable for those Baja races. Pickup trucks are, of course, body-on-frame vehicles, so the frame is all that's keeping the vehicle from folding like a taco if you jet yourself off of some hump somewhere and then land a little too hard on the ground. You can actually end up bending the frame. A lot of first-generation Raptor owners complained about that, but I think they were driving their trucks just a little harder than the average shopper. Ford has supposedly strengthened the new Raptor to help prevent some of that, but obviously if you try and take your truck into a ski ramp, demolition derby, that's going to happen in any truck, but the Raptor's frame is going to be more resistant to that than the standard frames that we find in any other pickup trucks. We don't know again what the Ram Rebel will be like when it finally comes, but if Chrysler does not choose to put in a new frame, then that will be a big differentiator between the two. On the flip side, for the Rebel TRX, if they do give it that 575 horsepower supercharged V8, it's probably going to be one of the fastest pickup trucks that we've seen in America. My bottom line with the Raptor is that this is absolutely one of the most fun pickup trucks you can buy in America. It may not be as practical as regular F-150 models for towing or for hauling or for handling on dry surfaces, but the Raptor is an awful lot of fun, and it really does look great in person. For some reason, I'm reminded of our recent video review on the Honda Ridgeline. In that video, I said that the Ridgeline is all the truck that 95% of truck shoppers in the half-ton truck segment actually need, but only what about 5% of those shoppers seem to want. I think in many ways the Raptor is the inverse, because most people want a Raptor, but only a few of us will ever use the Raptor to its fullest potential. But that's okay, because even though the Raptor does not handle as well as the rest of the F-150 lineup, the payloads are lower, towing abilities may not be up there with other comparably equipped F-150 models, it still is a pickup truck, so it's still going to be very useful as a pickup truck with that bed in the back and a decent payload capacity, and then you can take it off-roading on the weekend. That's been our quick look at the 2017 Ford Raptor. Be sure and check out our other videos on our channel. You can hit that button down there at the bottom of your screen, find those there. Check out those related videos. If you want to support alexonautos.com, head over to patreon.com and look us up over there. You can also find us over at facebook.com/alexonautos and check out what vehicles we're driving this week. I'll see you next week.